Hi, and welcome to the Business Growth Journey podcast with me, Nick Termini. Today, we've got an awesome guest, Travis Wentworth. Travis, welcome to the show, man. How's it going?
Thanks for having me. It's going great.
Awesome, man. Well, so first to get started, how do we know each other, Travis?
Yeah, I mean, we've met at a couple of different events, but it was mostly networking events of all kinds of different types, some business meetups and some other like personal events with some friends. So a few different ways, I think.
Yeah, absolutely. So, Travis, in the Business Growth Journey podcast, the whole goal is to showcase, your career and how you got to where you are, and also talk about what's ahead. But first, before we get going there, tell us about you. Where'd you grow up? Where'd you go to school?
Yeah, so I'm originally from the smaller state. I didn't realize it was that small until I got out here, the state of Maine. Yeah. And when I got out here, I didn't realize like I have never met anybody else from Maine in Kansas or Missouri. I've never met anybody else, like never. Every now and then someone will be like, "Oh, my ex-husband's from so and so," but I still to this day have not met anyone in Kansas City from Maine. Yeah.
This is great. So, do people in Maine not leave usually?
I think it's a combination of people in Maine not leaving, right? Also, it's like it's only bordered by one state, right? So you got to go out of New Hampshire to get anywhere else in the lower 48. And so it's a combination of people not leaving and then also, right, like there's just not a lot of people. I think it's like 1 million people just in the entire state. So it's just not a ton of people and then not a lot of places to go from there unless you're going to stay in the Northeast. So I mean even when I moved to Kansas, right, for grad school, like everyone where I was leaving was like, "Where are you going? Why are you going there?" And I was like, "I don't know."
Oh man, I haven't actually been to Maine, but so how long were you in Maine? Just that's where you grew up, high school,
Yeah,
college?
I lived there all through. I lived in the same house until I was like 18, moved out and went to the University of Maine, which is like 3 hours north of my hometown in Maine. I grew up in like southern Maine. There's kind of two parts. There's like the city part of Maine, which is kind of where I'm from, like an hour north of Boston. And then there's like what you would think of like Maine, like moose and lakes and trees and stuff. And that's really not, I mean, there was woods where I grew up, but it was like it's not like that. So when
Yeah.
I went up to the University of Maine, though, I was like, whoa, this is like, it's a land grant university on like an island bordered on all sides by like rivers and stuff. Like it's technically an island. And so it's just this wild, like it was cold, it was engineering, it was difficult. It was dark a lot of the times. It's 3 hours even further north from where I'm from. So it was more of like an engineering and like grinding experience than I would have thought college would be, I think, when I went up that way. Yeah.
Okay. And just real quick, like what type of activities, like each state kind of has their own thing, right? Like what were a lot of outdoor activities or activities people like to do in Maine?
Sure. Well, actually, I grew up like riding ATVs and dirt bikes and stuff like that.
Yeah.
And so you would like ride through the trails in the woods and stuff. And they would, everything is so dense out there that there you really had to beat trails in, honestly, to get to where you needed to go. And so you could only go to specific places and things like this. We did ATVs and dirt bikes for a long time. And then also, obviously, I was a skier and a snowboarder. So when the winter hits, I mean, you've got to do something. And so I skied until I was maybe 7 or 8 and then snowboarded after that. When I got out here, I didn't snowboard as much. And I probably go like once a year now. And there was a period there where I didn't snowboard for 7 or 8 years. It's kind of sad, honestly. It's one of those skills. It's like if it's like riding a bike, but it was weird not having done it. So those are some of the things we did there.
Well, that's all fun stuff. And I mean, some of it you can do, you're not all of it, right?
Yeah, I always tell people that like, when you're a kid or when you're in high school or whatever, you're always like, man, there's nothing to do where I am. And when I moved out here and met people, especially from like Western Kansas, where there really isn't anything to do, I realized like, oh, I grew up like 20 minutes from the ocean, 25 minutes from the 2 hours from the best skiing and snowboarding in the Northeast, moose in my backyard. Like it actually, where I grew up, there was much more to do than where a lot of native Kansans and Missourians grew up, to be honest with you.
Oh yeah, no, I mean that's stuff. I have cousins that live in Connecticut, and like it's the same kind of thing where it's just beautiful rolling hills and mountains, and one way's the ocean, the other way's the cities. I mean, it's pretty cool. Oh, Travis, before we dive in deeper on college, when you were growing up, I know you're a serial entrepreneur and have had many different things going on throughout your career. What did you have like any startup companies you did in like high school or earlier in life before getting into the professional world?
I didn't the experience I had that I would say at that time that really kind of shaped my passion for, being independent in that way was, my father had, a business along the same lines of the cybersecurity business that I have now. And
Okay.
so he had a training center in Portsmouth, New Hampshire with another instructor. And so they had this facility and they had classrooms and they had stuff like this. And so I would be in there doing like odd jobs and whatnot and kind of helping them out, both because they had kind of my family had asked me to, but also like at my own request. Right. So I have a sister who's just a year younger than me and she was not interested in any of that stuff. Right. And so they were like, you could do this and, whatever for the business. And she was like, no, I'm not doing that. And I was like, let's do it. I'll go mow the lawns. I'll go call people. I'll work the front desk or whatever. I wasn't necessarily the best at it, to be frank with you, but it was something that I had a passion for. And I had an opportunity to get in there and see what it looked like when they were building the thing out. And they were literally hanging drywall and picking paint colors and setting their offices up. Like I was there when they were doing that stuff and in and out. And it was just, I thought it was just the coolest thing. I was like, this is amazing. Like this is
Yeah.
their thing. I thought I couldn't get enough of it. Yeah.
Oh, no, that's a great example because a lot of people's careers are shaped by, what they saw from their parents growing up. And, for a lot of business owners or entrepreneurs, their parents or somebody in their family gave them exposure to that kind of made them think like that. When you look back at it, like what were some of the areas of the business that you gravitated to or would ask more questions about?
I'll tell you what I gravitated to and what I'm not still any good at. So I'll tell you what the thing that really interested me and I was terrible. I still am not the best at it, but I always thought it was interesting how you get people in the door. So sales, right? I'm a nerd. I'm an engineer, right? But I took an engineering mindset to like how you get people in the door. And so I was just always like curious, where did people find you? How do you get a business? How are you teaching for the naval nuclear shipyard? How are you working for Liberty Mutual and their primary data center? How did they find you, right? How did the public classes? Like I never got it, to be honest with you. That was you asked what was interesting, not what I was good at.
Yeah, no, I mean, but that's exactly right. That is fascinating stuff. Why do people come to you? How do you work with them? How do they know how to buy from you? All that good stuff.
My favorite story is one day my father had a directory of local businesses. They were at like a business park right outside of actually the naval shipyard and a bunch of other things. That's kind of where they set up. And he had a directory and he's like, yeah, I need to do some like cold calling and let the businesses here know that I'm here and this and that. And I was like, well, why haven't you done it? He's like, because I don't enjoy it. And I was like, what's not enjoyable about it? You just call them and let them know. And he's like, then you do it. I was like, okay. And I did it. I did like maybe half the list and I did not find it very enjoyable either.
That's funny. I remember when I got into real estate and was really doing a lot of heavy cold calling, but it's all mindset, right? Like, yeah, I remember the first couple calls, I'm like, ooh, that was bad. And then I'd write down like notes of like, okay, this went well, this didn't. I need to try this, overwhelm them with enthusiasm. And before you know it, my mindset was on the other side of the line is either somebody that I could become friends with or a way to make money or put something good together. And it was the only way I would think about it to just keep hammering away because so many people develop a phobia over the making calls, cold calling, whatever.
Yeah,
Yeah.
people don't like to call to schedule their own appointments, most people in general, right? Better yet, calling someone who you're not giving business to, right? You're
Yeah.
either asking something of or trying to let them know
Yeah.
about, right?
Yeah. I know people would rather do a social media post. Like, yeah, I made a post. I sent an email. Yeah.
Yeah.
Conversations move the needle, not that stuff. That's a good
And that's
start.
true to this day. Yeah.
Yeah. Exactly. So, okay, Travis, now you're going to college. Tell us about what you went to college for and what that experience was like.
Yeah, so I went to college for chemical engineering. I got my BS in chemical engineering from the University of Maine. I just kind of had always known that that was a space that I was really interested in, had a natural kind of knack for, right? I'm an engineer at heart. I'm just an analytical guy. And so I remember growing up, maybe junior high or high school when I liked chemistry and I liked math. And my mother was like, you should be a chemical engineer. My father went to school for electrical engineering and I didn't like circuits. I didn't want to do mechanical. I just didn't want to like work on mechanical things. I was okay at it, but I really liked kind of not so far down as physics, but not so far up as like biology. And so I just like this in between where you're like making physical changes to systems and doing things and you can see the outlet and you're also kind of thinking through what the scale up of that is. That's what chemical engineering is, right? It's like scaling these chemical processes. So anyway, I liked that and I went to school for it. The joke I always tell people, so I went to graduate school and we'll get there, but everybody, always assumes then that I was just this amazing student. And I'm very intellectually or academically good, but I wasn't an amazing student. I like the things I like. And so I went to college in my first 2 semesters. I didn't do great. I think I had like a 2 point something GPA, right? And even the professor mentor in chemical engineering in the intro to chemical engineering course is like, is this really what you want to do? And I was like, oh yeah, no, I just didn't like try really hard, but I'm really motivated. And he was like, okay, like I guess. And I was like, oh no, I knew what I wanted to do from the jump. And even when I got there, I was like, oh, this is definitely for me. Yeah.
Yep. So that's awesome. So what is it you liked about it?
I love the I loved the systems, man. I loved that I could take math and science and apply it to the real world. So the first project we did in like intro to chemical engineering was they said design a device that would heat water. And so basically you had to take a little flame from a candle and make that flame produce, and take the heat from that produced flame and heat water with it. And whoever could heat the water to the highest temperature and have the lowest amount of like material, so there were some constraints, right? Whoever could do that the best would win the project. And I remember I was like failing the class, and myself and another guy who shared my kind of mentality around school, we were just like, we're only going to do what we want to do. We made this thing, and we were like second in all of the categories, which was way better than everyone else, right? Everyone optimized for one thing, and we just won. We just came in one below every single person and won the thing running away. And I remember talking to another professor about this. And I was like, what did you guys do? Because we built some things. We used like Mylar shielding that you see on like the space stations and things like this, but you can get it at like Home Depot and stuff. So we used a couple of things. And one of the professors, this is when I knew I was in the right place. And I was talking to a professor, and he was like, oh, we did this project, the professors, because we thought it was cool after the fact. And they built they took a straw and like a twizzle straw, and they basically took the flame and kind of piped it into this straw and took that hot air and used it as a heat exchanger. So they took the knowledge that they knew from chemical engineering as like full professors, and they were like, oh, we'll turn this into a heat exchanger. We'll take all of the hot gas, and then not only did that hot gas exchange the heat really well because they had a bunch of surface area, but it also accelerated the flame because it started pulling air in. And I was like, this is cool, man. And this is where I want to be. And so like that's what I did. I went and I did an internship. So I did an internship at a paper mill and in a specialty coated paper factory. My the end of my sophomore year and like the beginning of my junior year. So they had this program where you could go 1 semester off, 1 semester on internships and get a full year of internship and stay on track to graduate in 4 years. So I did that. Like it wasn't easy to get the internship because my grades weren't great. So I would go to interviews and they'd be like, tell me about these, mediocre grades. And I'd be like, I'm an engineer, man. I love this stuff. I don't love that stuff. And
Yeah.
that's what got me my internships too. I got like offers for internships where other people didn't because I was like basically a good storyteller, but I was genuine, you know?
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, does everybody always like everything? I mean, I think, your exposure to things you like are what kind of shape the path, right?
Yeah, yeah, I found the same thing, man, where you like, and I think that, for better or worse, we gravitate to the things that we enjoy, right? Not just the things that you're good at, but the things that really like make you think and whatever gets your brain going or whatever it is, your feet going where you want to be. For me, it was like, I have to be interested in this thing. I don't say this very much on podcasts, but I don't know if I've ever said this, but on a public forum, but that's why I love my wife so much is like I was always not very interested in people in general. And I just always thought that to this day, right? She's just the most interesting person to me.
That's awesome. And I think she would love hearing this.
I'm sure she would. Yeah.
That's great. And so, man, that's awesome. So once you got going down this path in school, like what were you starting to see your future shape up as?
Yeah, I'll tell you what. I'll say I thought about if you think about like through the lens of entrepreneurship, for example. I thought about it a lot, and I didn't have a good path for it, right? Especially in chemi, because everything is so capital intense, right? So you're talking about facilities and distillation columns and pulp and paper plants and all these other things that involve chemical engineering, extraction and botanicals extraction and polymer extrusion and just all these things. Like even when I say them, like if you're not even a chemical engineer, you can still think like this is probably going to take a lot of stuff. You know what I mean? Like, and it does, right? And so I didn't have a great idea. I will tell you, I got to the end of my career in my undergraduate, right, at UMaine, and I had done the internships. And even in my internships, I was like always trying to find a way not to work. Right, I would be hanging out in the chemicals testing labs, and the labs were where the most senior guys got to go because they were air conditioned and all this stuff. So I'd hang out in the air conditioning with all the old heads, and I'd just shoot the bull. Right, like that's and again though, you find your way, right, because those guys, I had other engineers that would ask me, like an intern, hey, can you get these guys to do this stuff for me? Right. And they would be like, I need a sample taken off the line, or I need this stuff tested ahead of time before we ship it out to China. And these guys won't do it. And they're the most senior. So I don't have any pull at all because they're in the unions and this and that now. And they're like, they'll only do it if they want to. And you're hanging out with them. I'm like, sure. And so I would ask them, I'd be like, hey, could you do me a favor? I need to bring it back to Noah, who was my boss at the time. And so I found myself in this kind of in between where I just like I knew I didn't want to be working, like I didn't even enjoy working for a boss, right? Even when I was there, I loved the stuff, but my goal was like to not have a boss even when I had a boss, right?
Yeah,
So I'll
that's
tell
how
you,
most people that have been on the podcast are wired, Travis.
yeah. And it's funny, right? Because no two paths are the same either,
No,
right? Like, yeah.
not even a little bit. Okay, and so you've already established, I don't like having a boss. Maybe I don't need a boss. So like, what led you from undergrad to go to grad school, and from Maine to Kansas?
Yeah. So two things, right? I definitely didn't want a boss, and I didn't want to work in pulp and paper. And then there was this other thing that I haven't talked about is I had a full scholarship through the Pulp and Paper Foundation at the University of Maine. And so they were wonderful enough to, once my grades met a certain threshold, they knew that I was a great engineer. I had worked in the pulp and paper facilities. They gave me a full tuition scholarship for my last 2 years while I was there. And before that, I had had academic scholarships. So it was pretty cool, the way that I kind of got my college paid for. There were really two options. They didn't force you into pulp and paper, but it really was like hey, we're going to give you this opportunity, and we would really appreciate it if you return the favor. The only other option that they were really cool with was going to graduate school. And so I knew I didn't want a boss. I didn't really want to work in pulp and paper. I didn't want to be in a facility. I didn't know where I was going. And then this other opportunity where it was like, hey, you could go to grad school. And I had done a little bit of undergraduate research at that time too. So after my internships, right? After I look back, I felt like I was kind of like skating through. And then I look back, I'm like, I did all these internships. I did undergraduate research for the Forest Bioresearch Initiative Project, FBRI, at the university. Like I was like, man, I really was kind of doing a lot of stuff.
When you love it, maybe it doesn't seem like as much. I don't know.
It really doesn't, man. Yeah, I remember we did the chemical engineering car where you try and power a car through a chemical reaction and stop it. And myself and another really great engineer who I think is out in like the Midwest too now. He and I worked our entire spring break on it just together. It was like 7 or 8 of the engineers in the senior class were part of it, but we all knew like he and I were the ones who had done all the testing and done all this stuff, and we won the thing at the regionals. It went to the nationals the following year, but we weren't there anymore, and it flopped anyway. So I really did. Yeah, we did a bunch of stuff and it was just really enjoyable. But so I applied to graduate schools because I was, I knew that was kind of the path. And I felt like grad school was kind of that idea of like, you don't have a boss. So I was going to go get a master's and then decide what to do from there. And I applied to a bunch of schools. I applied to Delaware, Virginia, Colorado, Kansas. And anybody who's in engineering hearing those schools knows that the first 3 schools I listed, Virginia, Delaware, and Colorado, are some of the best engineering schools in the country. I already told you my academics weren't amazing. They were good by that time once I graduated, but they weren't amazing. And I didn't get a lot of mentorship, at least from my advisors at the University of Maine, in terms of they were like, just find a program you like. And so I found some programs I liked. And lo and behold, all the cool research was being done at all the best universities, right? And so I got like waitlisted or denied at a bunch of those universities. And the University of Kansas is kind of like a tier below the top tier of engineering schools. They're a very good engineering school. They get like the tier 1 research funding grants and all that stuff. So they're amazing. And I wouldn't take anything away from my program at the University of Kansas, but even they would tell you, right, that some of these schools are, really high up there. And so Kansas didn't get a lot of, at that time, I don't know if they do now or not, but a lot of domestic applicants. And so they were like, hey, some random domestic applicant from Maine. They gave me an offer to go out there and be on stipend, right? And so basically if you're a stipend graduate student, right, your school is paid for and you're paid like a small amount to kind of live.
Yeah.
And so I was like, cool. And I went out and interviewed just to make sure that it was kind of a good fit. And I liked the school, and I like toured the university campus, and I was like, this is awesome. Right. It was like April and it was like 80 degrees and there was like students everywhere. And they had just put in the brand new gym and facilities and all that stuff. And I was like, this is exactly where I want to be. I really wanted an extension of my undergraduate because I was having so much fun. Right. I really was. I just really enjoyed it. And so I was like, yeah. The other thing about that is KU was on my radar from the national title in '08. They won me my pool in '08. And then I applied to graduate schools in '09. And so I was like, I'll take a look if they had some material science programs. And that's what I was interested in. I was really interested in physical materials, things like ceramics, superconducting materials. I had taken a course in that in my undergraduate with a professor I really liked out there. Actually, my advisor from the first year, who was like, "You sure you want to do this?" I took his class years later, and I really enjoyed that aspect of engineering. I thought materials were just unbelievably interesting, especially their chemical properties and some of their electrical properties as well. And so that's what I tried to go to graduate school for. It didn't really work out that way, and that's very common. So I don't deride any of that stuff either. But that's what I originally went for, and that was really what my original project was some material science work.
So what was it like going from living in Maine your whole life to then coming out to the Midwest and being at Kansas? I mean, away from family, half the country away. Like what was that like for you? And like how did you grow just from stepping way outside of your comfort zone, at least geographically? I'm sure there were some cultural differences too that you know took
Yeah.
testing.
It was wild, man. I will tell you, especially when I was like a nerd in just engineering, like I didn't really think about kind of the ancillary impact of like going and moving across the country. Other people did. I told you when I was moving out, they're like, "You're going to Kansas? Like, when? What are you doing?" And so they knew that it was going to be, kind of a weird transition and difficult. I didn't really think about it. I just like I rented an apartment from another college senior, and his mom owned the house out like next to the field house, and I wanted to be close to Allen Fieldhouse because I wanted to go to games. And I was like, "Oh, I'll just drive out." I drove my Honda Civic out and landed, 3 days before everything started. And then when everything started, right, when my graduate work started and when my coursework started, right, and when I was trying to find and meet people, like it really was like the social aspect and kind of the underlying like just all of it. Like, where do you get your groceries? What are the convenience stores named? Everything is roads are gridded, which I had never experienced, right, in New England. The trees are different, like all of this stuff, the winters are just non-existent compared to where I had come from, right? I'm just driving my Honda Civic through like half a foot of snow and nobody's out and the school's closed and I'm paying my rent. You know what I mean? Like, and so like, and then people were like, "Well, you're nuts." Right. And so it was, and I will tell you, I don't know if I've told this one on a podcast either, but I remember it was my second semester. My first semester was wild, dude. The coursework was really hard. Everyone was like, it's kind of like, going from high school athletics to like D1 athletics, right? Everyone is at that level of intelligence that you kind of pride yourself on. And you think, I'm just sharper than everybody else. That's why I
Yeah.
loved it. And now it's like there's like, students from China and India and from the West Coast and from everywhere trying to go to these D1 universities. And they were just sharp as tacks, right? And you just didn't have this skill advantage. And so now you're like, man, everybody's trying hard, everybody's smart, everybody wants to be here, everybody enjoys it for the most part, right? And it was like academics was like a punch in the face. The social and the like underlying societal stuff was like a punch in the face. It was really intense. I remember being in my office, I think it was my second semester, my third semester, and like just like laying on the ground and just being like, this is like really overwhelming, right? Just like close your eyes and you're like, man, I just need a second, man. Like it was really intense from everything, just social life, graduate work, and trying to spin up my research project, trying to complete the core competencies, my courses, coursework, all that stuff. Just really, really kind of takes a toll on you when there's not a time in your life where you can find that break.
But yeah, 100%. I mean, your brain is in overload from on every aspect of life. Yeah, man, that's a huge adjustment.
Yeah. It gives you some perspective though, I will tell you, right? So like it definitely makes you like think or understand that like, stuff isn't as hard as you think it is sometimes where you're like, I can go out here and I can do all the things that you took for granted, plus, right, build a career and build a rapport and find an advisor and find a research team and transition and all this stuff.
Dude, it's wild because in like the beginning, the early phase of it, it's like an adventure. Like, oh, I'm really doing it. This is cool. And then like real life settles in. So when I graduated from college at Northwest Missouri State, I moved down to Georgia, did 6 months of training. Then I did an internship in Detroit. And then I was out in Virginia Beach for 5 years. And I remember like my parents left, got moved into my apartment like the second or third week. And I'm like, what have I gotten myself into? Same thing. I don't know the grocery store. I don't I don't know anybody. Like all these things. It's like I'm 23 and I'm just sitting in my apartment by myself on a Friday. What am I doing, man?
Where I used to go sit at Applebee's. And but back in the day, Applebee's was cooler, guys. So just bear
Well,
with me here.
I think it's always been the same.
And I would just go and I would grab a beer and I would get like the app sampler at Applebee's. And like the bartender invited me out one night because she felt bad for me. And I was like, no, I like it here. Like this is my Friday afternoon or late afternoon after I get out of classes, I'm going to grab a beer and grab and have sampler and wind down. Like it's crazy.
Dude, that's great. So, okay, in grad school, what are some of the cool projects you worked on, or did you ever have a chance to get up and present or teach in class? Like, what's some of the different experiences you've had?
Yeah, so there were a few things in grad school. I'll tell you one that since you asked about kind of presenting and stuff, and I'll kind of go back before that. But the first presentation that I gave at a national conference, I was actually presenting someone else's research. So one of the graduate students had graduated, and I was kind of taking over his project, but most of the research was his. And this is not uncommon. It's not a really like crazy thing to do. It happens, right? Graduate students leave, and you need that presentation to continue on because they got a job and they didn't unexpectedly, right? They put the proposal in, it got accepted, but they unexpectedly left. So I went and did it, but I just remember like I didn't know a lot of what was done. I just remember like it was the most intense speaking engagement, and I'm not particularly shy, and I wasn't at that time either, right? In terms of public speaking, I'm okay. Everybody gets a little nervous or whatever, but I'm much better
Part
than
of it.
most. Yeah, and I will tell you, I mean, for that particular public speaking engagement, it was the most nervous I had ever been, probably the worst I ever did. It was so intense, man. Like I just remember sweating bullets. I remember asking afterwards, like professors at major research universities came to see this topic that this guy had researched for 4 years, and I just gave a talk on, and like, and they were asking me questions, and I was like, I don't know, man. Like, what did it not say in the presentation? I like it was wild. I just was sweating. I asked one of my colleagues, I was like, "Hey, how'd I do?" He's like, "Maybe don't touch your face so much next time."
Dude, I can relate. I've given some really bad presentations where you leave and it's like, that just happened. Like that was
Yeah.
painful.
The takeaway is it can't get any worse. That was my takeaway even
No,
then,
it
right?
can't. I mean, you keep getting up and doing it again, man. You get better.
There's not like I think about it to this day when I get nervous for something or I'm out in Germany giving a talk or whatever, like, and I'm just like, it could not go any worse than that from 10 years ago. It couldn't, dude. Like,
Oh man, yeah, it's a bad speech is pretty painful in the soul.
oh my God.
Okay, so like as you're you know going through grad school, are you starting to get a feel for what you want your career to look like and what you want to do after school?
Yeah, it's funny that you say that. So I went to grad school to go get a master's degree and just kind of keep the party going, honestly. And not in the, not just in the like school sense, but also in the chemical engineering sense. Like I just really enjoyed what I was doing, right? And I had some students always ask me, like in chemi when I was teaching them, right, as a grad student, they would be like, "I don't enjoy what I don't know if I like what I'm doing, and it's miserable and hard." I'm like, "Leave, dude. Like, what are you doing, right?" And they would be like, "Yeah, but you're here. You went and got your undergraduate, and you're here." I'm like, "I love it, man." Like I'm just hanging out, right? So yeah, so you're saying how did we get to kind of or what did it look like for the next step? And I'll tell you an intermediate story, which is when I was in grad school, I didn't know what I was going to do next. And I didn't even know like what I wanted to do in grad school, right? I knew I wanted to research. I knew I didn't want a boss. And so at the same time, and this is true, I was playing online poker at that time. This is we call it Black Friday when they shut down online poker for basically for good. And I was like doing pretty well. And I almost dropped out of grad school just to be a online poker professional for a little while. I was like, whatever, man. I'm making some money. I'm having a good time. I went to my advisor and my advisor was like, I told my advisor came out of left field completely because I loved the stuff I was doing. So I wasn't doing anything less. I was just adding on, doing this stuff in the evenings and on weekends and stuff. And so I was like, I think I might just like drop out next semester and take a semester off. And she was like, I saw her eyes get like real big and she's like, whoa. Like, she's like, I really like having you. Excuse me. If you can do both things, just do them both, man. She's like, you're not causing me any problems. It sounds like you're doing great. Just do both things. And I was like, that sounds pretty good, right? And so I did both things. And then maybe 3 months later, online poker got shut down. And one of my graduate student colleagues got married. And I remember sitting at a table with my advisor and myself at my buddy Luke's wedding. And she was like, how's that online poker going? And I was like, it's not. Like, she was like, okay. And that was kind of the last time that I was like, yeah, maybe we're not going to finish this thing. So anyway, I had this mindset of like, I'm always kind of doing something else. I'm thinking about other things, right? Right? I just wanted to be independent and I just never liked relying on, there's a component of not wanting to have a boss and there's a component of like producing your own value. right? I felt like my salary wasn't derived from my producing my value in graduate school, but my graduating was, right? Whatever I did is how long it took me to do certain things. And the same thing, like I wanted to have control of my own fate. The same thing about asking about, how do you find people and how did people find you stuff? Like I just always wanted to control my own fate for whatever reason that was. And it wasn't until, we keep this narrative keeps going, unfortunately, right? Where I don't actually find that entrepreneurship component until like I went and did I did a postdoctoral research fellowship after that. And so I did a postdoctoral research fellowship in the same research
Wait,
vein.
wait,
I
wait.
was researching.
What does that mean, Travis?
Yeah. So it means you got your PhD and you're not going to be a professor and you're not going to go into like the real business world. And so you're going to research, right? And you could be a postdoc at like a national lab, right? So you could actually be a postdoctoral research fellow, right? At a bunch of different places. You could actually do it at a company too. You could be at like Dow or DuPont. You could be at Oak Ridge National Lab or something like that, right? Or you could be at a university. And so you're not in the corporate world. You're not they wrote the grant and they can't trust an undergrad to do it, and they can't trust a grad student to do it, and you're doing it. Yeah, that's what that is.
Thanks for breaking that down because I have a marketing undergrad degree. That's it. You lost me a long time ago on the advanced degrees, but no, this is awesome, man. Because I think few people will have gone down the journey that you have, but also being like each time you describe it, it's because you love doing it. It's because it was fun, like because it, filled your cup up. And like you talked about not having a boss, people either run away from something or they run to it. And like for you, when you're talking about not having a boss is running away from it, but then you realize you want to build your value and find something that you love is really like what you're running to. So it's cool to hear how everything's starting to shape together.
Yeah. Yeah, and it's a combo of, right, not wanting and wanting certain things and
Yeah.
needing to get to where you're gonna go. And so even the postdoc was like, I got to the end of my graduate career and, maybe people don't know this, but, it's not always the easiest to get your advisor motivated to get you graduated, right? Especially if you have like a great advisor and they're a full professor, or they're like my advisor now is the director, the head of chemical engineering at the Department of Chemical Engineering at KU. And actually my advisor in my postdoc is the head of chemical engineering at Chalmers in Sweden. So like they were just the best, right? But they're not motivated to get you graduated. They don't need you for a statistic or to help them get the next tier up. They don't like you're independent of them. So they don't see you very often. So it's like, okay, how do you get to the next thing, which is your PhD is completed, right? And defended, and the next thing. And a lot of the times, the way you get to that next thing, and I don't know if I would preach this to everybody, but the way you get to that next thing is you find a position, right? Like you have a job lined up, and now your advisor is motivated to get you to that next step. And as long as your advisor's on the same page, and I wouldn't advise you just go out and apply for jobs, right? If your advisor doesn't think that you're ready to graduate, right? But if you I got to a point where she was like, yeah, my advisor, Susan Williams, shout out to her. She's amazing. I saw her the other day at a KU football game. She's just the
Awesome.
best. Yeah, I mean, that's if you ask me about who shaped my life and stuff like this, she's on the short list, right? But right, she was like, you're good to go, man. Like you've met kind of the requirements. You are thinking about the things in a way that is conducive, or that is consistent with a PhD level, which is really what a PhD means, is the way you're thinking about problems and the way you approach them. That's what that means, is you can solve a problem, synthesize the literature, and choose a direction and execute, right? And so she's like, you're good, man. And so I didn't know what to do. Part of it was motivating myself too. And so I started applying for positions, and one of them was this postdoctoral fellowship out in Sweden. And I remember telling my wife, I was like, there's no way I'm going to get this position. Run, it's overseas too. It's like the best research group in my field. My field was automotive emissions catalysis, but that's what I was researching in. And I had
Wait, wait, wait.
patterned all my
What does
research.
that mean?
Yeah. So how many times are we going to
Travis?
do this? Wait.
Yeah, I mean, I haven't done it nearly enough, but yeah, what could you break that down for us?
Yeah, so I was looking at emissions, reducing emissions from small diesel engines, mostly automotive emissions, right? Because they
What would
have to
be an
be on
example,
the
like a
road. Yeah, NO and NOx, NOx is specifically an example. There's other, right? There's like particulate emissions, PM, right? Particulate matter. There is like, CO or CO2 is another emission component, right? But NO and NOx are particularly bad. They contribute to greenhouse gas production and a bunch of other things. They're also like not great in terms of inhalation and stuff like this. And so there are strict regulations around NO and NO and NO2, or basically combined they're represented as NOx. There's strict regulations around NOx emissions. And so there's a lot of research in that area to continue to reduce NOx emissions. If you remember, like maybe 5 or 6 years ago, or maybe it's a little more than that now, but Volkswagen got in trouble for cheating emissions tests in the United States. It was a huge lawsuit, made national and international news. And the reason they were cheating was because they couldn't get NO and NO2 NOx levels to where they needed to be. So they were actually cheating on the emissions tests that I was actively researching, and I was in Europe at the time. So I guess it was almost 10 years ago now. So that's what that is. And that's where I was researching. Yeah.
Okay. Cool. And you know, another thing that you mentioned earlier, go back, but you're talking about your mentor and how critical component mentors, you know, come into play of opening your brain, giving you confidence, you know, helping guide you. Could you just talk a little bit more about how your mentor just kind of help shape your brain and the way you think to want to continue to grow?
Yeah. I would say a good mentor, right, in general will kind of, recognize the needs of the person across the table from them, right? And I think a lot of university professors do this very well. If you're an undergrad, you don't have a great one-on-one relationship with them, but when you get to graduate school and they are your mentors and they are giving you right advice and direction, you know, if you have a good advisor, a good research advisor will do this for you. And she was amazing for me. And so what I needed, honestly, was the opportunity and the space to fail, right? I hadn't failed a lot in my lifetime and I didn't really know what that looked like. And I was absolutely terrified of it, right? At that time, right? I was always ace and maybe I shouldn't say I didn't fail, but I didn't fail at anything I cared about. So I didn't care about, English, or I didn't care about, right? I was athletic enough, but I didn't care about being all state in athletics. I cared about math and science, and I cared about math club and math Olympiad and these engineering after hour stuff. I cared about being good at that. And I was very good at it. And so part of it was like I was good at it, but also I didn't fail at it. So I liked it more, right? This kind of that perpetual circle. And I needed some space to like, I just didn't know, what failing looked like. And and so there were a
So
bunch of
part
ways.
of it was like devastating to you to even like that was an option.
I couldn't even start, right? If I thought that the result was going to be a failure, right? I would just like lock up, right? And that was, as
Yeah.
for me, it was writing. I wasn't very good at writing. I'm still not amazing, but I couldn't get papers written, right? I could do all the research, but I couldn't write the papers, right? Because I was just terrified of putting stuff on paper, and my brain just like doesn't go in that linear fashion, which makes me a wonderful engineer, a pretty good entrepreneur, but not a great writer. And so, I mean, she was good at, like helping me through these things and was never really, let's say mean or, like putting me down about my writing. But I would actually say that in research, it was more valuable. And it was really what kind of turned the corner for me is like, I would make a mistake or something would fail or I would blow something up, right? Like really, like I melted a furnace. I melted a crucible, like a ceramic crucible. These things are good up to like 1,000 degrees Celsius, hot, right? And I melted it in a furnace, right? And then not only that, but I did it again. I did it like 3 weeks later. I melted it again, right? And this is like, $20,000 furnace. And I just ruined the entire internal block of this furnace, which is thousands of dollars. And I was just mortified, And I went to my advisor and I said, I just remember this clear as day. I was like, I don't know what happened. I thought it was fine. And I messed up. And she was like, it's okay, dude. Like, this is research. No one's ever done this stuff before. What are you gonna do? Like, you know what I mean? And she just sat there calm as the day is long, you know what I mean? And she had that reaction for me consistently over the entirety of my career, which was just amazing to have a mentor who was always there for you in kind of the way that you want it, right? Or the way that you need it, even. Not even, I didn't even know that I needed that type of support personally, but like she was like, look, it's cool, man. All right, well, this writing wasn't great. Okay, well, you had a fallout with another TA and you guys weren't doing great. We were working together for her class. Okay, whatever, man. Like, it was just consistently given the opportunity to either mess up or things not to go great or to fail. And from someone who holds themselves to a really high standard like she does, right? It was really wonderful to say, hey, like someone who holds themselves to a high standard also believes in the ability to fail. Someone who you never see fail, at least not anymore, right? Or not very consistently, is like, it's cool, man. I'll tell you, that was an amazing thing for me, and to be able to apply that to, business and entrepreneurship and all these other things like it, and my relationships and all these other things, like it really set me up for success. And, I don't know where I would be without it. I'll tell you that right now. And I don't know how quickly I would have learned that lesson, but I learned it in as much time as as quick as I could have with, with that time I spent with her.
That's huge, man, because I mean, like, so many people don't start or try things like you said earlier because of they're worried about the failure outcome. And when you accept failure as part of the process to grow, then it eliminates that fear, right? Like something's going to happen, but anything that has ever been made has had many failures to even get to a level of production or success, right?
Yeah, I try to explain that to people now too, right? Because we've been going
Yeah.
over some of my accolades or whatever, all these things that I've done, and they're like, "It's easy for you to say now," and I'm like, "I hear you, dude, but it wasn't easy to fail then, and and I want you to know that too." Like,
That no, and that's great because most people see the result and where you are now, or when the body of work gets bigger, and they don't realize all the countless hours you put into it, like your whole being to be able to grow to get to that level, and the pain that comes in with that. The term growing pains is a real thing. This isn't just like some cliche group of words, right?
yeah, I never thought that. Like, I always wanted to do things that made me happy and that I enjoyed, and I never wanted a boss, and I didn't realize that, like, part of that is, right, these growing pains. Like,
Yeah.
it's not all sunshine and rainbows, even if you're doing the thing that you always thought you wanted to do, or all those things.
Yeah, and the days that aren't sunshine and rainbows are the ones that lead you to the sunshine and rainbows, right? I mean,
You're absolutely right, man. You said a couple of things on here. The one that I meant to point out was about moving places, and you were like, "Yeah, it's awesome. It's all new." And then, bam, you know what I mean? I was like, "Man," when you said it, I was like, "That's exactly how I felt." But anyway,
yeah.
yeah,
Oh, 100%, man. It's like the most exciting and loneliest feeling all at once.
unbelievable. Yeah,
I mean, I lived right off the ocean and I'm like, this is cool. I don't do anything in the ocean.
right. I don't
I
even
don't
know anybody
surf,
who knows where
I
the
don't
ocean is. Like,
bodyboard. Like, yeah, it was easy to get home. It was just go all the way east. Um, okay. So Travis, now you're wrapping up your fellowship, right?
yeah. So I go move to Sweden, do the postdoc, do the whole move thing again. Right
Yeah. I
now, you're
mean,
in a foreign country,
man, the
dude.
food, the
Yeah.
everything.
The first thing I did was I went to Subway. I just needed some comfort, man. Right? It's all these American staples. I'm like Burger King, Applebee's, Subway.
Yeah. I
But
didn't
it
like it
is,
when I
right?
was at home, but now that I'm here and let it take me there. Yeah,
Yeah.
I'm
Yeah.
definitely tracking with you. What
But
what were
yes,
some of the main, like, foods there? Like, what's, like, just
so you're barking up the wrong tree, brother. I'm the most bland food guy.
yeah, no
I've got a
worries.
weak stomach. I will tell you though, the thing about Sweden that I liked, and this is something that my wife hated. She would visit me. We didn't go out there together, but it's very bland. Swedish food and Nordic food is very bland. It's like sandwiches, cured meats, like some pasta. It's maybe the thing that they love the most, and you'll never guess this, is kebab. They just love, and
Meat
every
on a
time you
stick.
it's like, what's the best thing on the menu? They're like, our kebab pizza. And I'm like, everybody's best thing can't be kebab pizza. It can't be the best at every restaurant. I can't, like, what?
What kinda crust they have?
It's like traditional crust. They don't do thin crust. It's
No
not
crust
like,
crust.
Chicago. It's just, again, when you think of like the blandest pizza, right? Regular crust thickness. That's right up the alley. They don't do weird sauces. Maybe one place that's like, fancy cuisine, but yeah, yeah.
Man, okay, so now you're moving back to the United States. You have all of this, now worldly life experience, from moving from Maine to Kansas, Kansas to Sweden.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
I mean, and then back. Like, what type of confidence did that give you, that you've put yourself out there in these different scenarios where I'm guessing most people have not had this kind of life experience? Like, what was that like for you just in general, like going through all of that?
I'll tell you what, man, it took me even a few years after all of that to realize how much life experience I had really achieved. You know what I
Yes.
mean? It
Yeah.
didn't like, I came back and I was looking for a position back in the States. I couldn't get interviews because I was a domestic applicant living abroad. And they're like, what are we going to do? Fly you back to interview you? Like, so it was the weirdest thing. I'm like, I want to get back to my wife who was working in Kansas City as a dentist, right? Like, she's here, ready to go. We're ready to start our lives. We thought we were going to do it after our graduate work.
Yeah,
And
yeah.
then we both did like these postdocs and all this other stuff. This was like I'm trying to get back, and I couldn't get an interview, or at least not in the types of stuff I wanted to do. And I didn't want to go live in Houston or Ohio or Detroit, these automotive kind of or research areas. And so, I had an opportunity to come back and do a work in the same field as my father, right? Who he does cybersecurity training and consulting for the Department of Defense. That's basically what he does. He does some one-off stuff for private businesses, and he used to run some public classes, but now he basically does cybersecurity training for the DoD, right? And at that time, it was 2017. He's like, hey, if you want to come back, and I had kept one foot in that space. I had taken on his classes, and I'm really technical, right? As we've kind of already mentioned. So it wasn't a big stretch. I was a data guy. I'm a huge data guy. Like, if we could do a whole separate thing on data analytics, which I would just love to do. And I miss it terribly, I'll tell you, which is kind of a weird thing to say, but so it made a lot of sense. And so he's like, yeah, come back and try and, get a couple of additional certs to kind of fill in the gaps. And if you can, get some experience in kind of this training space. And I was like, what does that mean, dude? Get some experience training. Like, he was like, yeah, man, if you can get a little bit of experience, then I can put you in these contracts. And I was like, what does that mean, dude? Like, what do you mean a little bit of experience? Right. And so this was my first real experience with like, hey, figure it out. Right. Go figure it out, dude. Like, if you want to work independently, if you want to, right, provide value, you have to be able to go show me you can do it. Right. He's like, I've had these contracts for decades. I can't just like put anybody in them, even my son with a PhD and a postdoc. It's just not going to happen. Right. And that's not even, he's not even he's not even a hardball guy. Like, he really is not. He's the sweetest guy ever. And even he was like, dude, he's like, you need a little bit of experience. I need to be able to trust that you can go in and on day one, do what you need to do. And that's like, if I would say entrepreneurship 101 is that's it. Right? Not that you need to know exactly everything, but you need to be able to go in on day one and do whatever it is you need to do. Right. And figure it out. Right. So this was the cool part. This is probably my favorite part is I got back from Sweden and I was like, all right, so these are waiting for me. I just need to find a way to get some experience. So I had completed a couple of additional certifications. I already had some experience, right, working and teaching, right, because I had done my graduate work as a teaching assistant. I had done some guest lectures and some of these other things. So it was really it's in my wheelhouse. And I threw my resume out to a couple of different places. I thought about maybe taking an assistant professorship at like JCCC, the local community college here, and maybe just like kind of getting some teaching experience that way and whatever. And what actually happened was they took my resume from the community college like professorship side, and somebody floated it to the continuing ed side at JCCC. And they reached out to me and they had an instructor fall off who is teaching the Cisco Certified Network Associate, the CCNA, which is a very common networking certification that we teach all the time. And they had a professor an instructor fall off like 2 days before. And they called me and they were like, hey, I got your resume from the professor group that they interviewed you. Would you be interested in doing this? And I was like, yeah, I would, right? And so I taught night classes for the community college for that course, and I did a couple of other night classes for them, and then I actually taught some other courses for them over the years. But that was my first. That was literally I remember it clear as day, and it was other than that one that lecture that I gave at the national conference, the first day I taught right as a cybersecurity or a networking instructor. That was like tier 1, and then right below it, tier 1A was my first day teaching in this space, and kind of basically right my first step into doing my own independent stuff, showing up, and it's on you. You do it. You're the expert in the room. These people are here to get that knowledge from you and pass an exam. Like, they're here, like they paid for this course to get this information, and no one else can give it to them but you right here, right now. It's cool, man. It's a cool feeling.
Okay, so did you go through like in that, I've seen and lived through like where you're the one that's chasing the pack, right? Like you're the one that's growing, that's learning from somebody, that's really pushing the limits to make everybody better. And then going from that, where you're like trying to lead the pack, to then being at the head of the class, where it's like they're here to hear from me, and like working through that imposter syndrome of like, man, I know I'm qualified, but like, am I right? Like, there's all these things. Like, did you ever go through that?
But yeah, man, it was brutal. I didn't enjoy it. Yeah, I like, and I've done it before. That wasn't even my first time, right? Like
Yeah.
I got my BS in chemie and felt like I had a knowledge base, and then I went to graduate school and got, absolutely
Each
obliterated
next
with the
level,
coursework.
it's like,
Yeah. Yeah, the only one that I didn't have that experience with was my postdoc, right? Like they brought me in for a very specific purpose and they brought me in to do stuff. And when I got there, I did stuff, right? That's a
yeah,
cool feeling, I will tell you.
yeah,
And you have to build that out though, right? So the same thing here. Like it took probably 2 or 3 years of teaching classes and being in and out of scenarios to then right at year 3 or year 4, where you walk in and you're just like, oh, I'm just doing the thing, right? And
just
you could
muscle
tell
memory.
me, yeah, and you could tell me you don't like me. You could tell me I've had dudes and really great guys. This isn't a slight on them, but I've had guys in class who are like, I wrote the standards. I was part of the steering committee in 1993, and I'm like, whoa, dude, I was 6 in 1993, right? Like, right, but they're in the class with you, right? So that means that they're there to learn something, and that's not to say
Yeah.
that they're not
Well, it's
partially experts in the
continual
space,
growth,
but
right? Like,
exactly, you're absolutely right.
growing up, I mean, a lot of things you've said are what I had, you know, just pounded into my head is, figure it out. Just, I don't know, figure it out. And then the other one that my dad would always say is the more you know you don't know. And in the beginning, I'm like, what the hell is he talking about? And I'm like, oh, that's what it means. Like, you got to keep going. Each door you open opens three new doors. That opens three new doors. And it's just infinite and abundant. You just got to keep going because the learning never ends.
Yep. And I will tell you, right? I mean, I've gone as far down into a subject, right, as you possibly can, all the way down in the literature, and then that's what you do, advance the literature, right? And like you could still, like, I mean, I would have considered myself an expert at that point, actually. But you know what I mean? Even almost to the very end of that spectrum, I would have said I'm not an expert in anything. Right. I know a lot about something, but there's a very small area of the world where I would have considered myself an expert at one point. But even now I'm so far removed, right?
Yeah.
Some of that knowledge base is stale, right? So
Yeah. And so what was next for you in your career?
yeah, right, so I figured out kind of the business model, and then, it's really interesting. So that was where when you're instructing and you're full-time in front of, I would call it on the podium, right? Like there really isn't a lot of room for working on the business, right? I would actually say there's not like, and when you're in these businesses that are like really technical and dependent on your technical acumen, then there's a hard, it's really hard to make the step from you're an expert and can sell yourself to like scaling that business. And there's a number of ways to scale it, right? You could scale it locally, you could scale it via digital infrastructure, you could scale it a bunch of different ways. It's really hard. And I'll tell you, like, that's the space in that business where I'm working on now. Right. And so I don't like the idea of scaling kind of locally and kind of drumming up business to business. I prefer to kind of like things like this where I like the digital infrastructure. And so, I mean, part of my scale out for that business for me is putting the courseware online and building out a digital presence, right? We have the Intelligence Quest YouTube channel, and I've got kind of the socials associated with that. Intelligence Quest is that business. And so that's the next step for me, is building that business out with like kind of a digital infrastructure. Now, so I'm learning. That's where I am at in that business. Now, that being said, right, I have figured out, right, I've had a wonderful experience doing business at a larger scale with the dental office. And so my wife, I mentioned earlier, is a dentist, right? And so we purchased a dental office 3 years ago, and it has really taught me a ton about what the next step of that business looks like in terms of scale, in terms of investing in people, investing in products, investing in a team, and what that team enables you to do. And you would be shocked at the comparisons between someone with the technical skill that I have in cybersecurity and networking and a dentist, right? It's just a different skill, but the team is built around enabling her skill set, right? And all the stuff that we do working in that business is to make everything more efficient for them and her. And it would be the same. It is the same for me, right? Like I'm working with a bunch of video editors and some other things, and I have a couple of other instructors who are working with us to do a couple of things.
Well, I
So
mean,
yeah.
that's a really good point, is coming in with as a fresh set of eyes and being able to see, it's most businesses come down to the same fundamentals, right? And so being able to break down, what empowers the team, what helps them grow, and being able to see that in the dental practice will also help you in like your other areas of interest that you're gonna, would want to grow companies, because you're able to come in and like you're in it, but right, you're not the dentist, you're not like the centerpiece like you are with your cybersecurity company. And so it gives you a totally fresh view, doesn't it?
It really does, and it's crazy how the business books get it right sometimes, right? You say some of it doesn't get it right, but I will tell you the ones that get it right are like, the transition from 0 to 1, right? In terms of customer, from 1 to you producing value, and from you producing value to your team enabling you to produce more value and working in that business. Like that transition is real. And the steps, and they're like, yeah, this is why you're reading this book because, or listening to this podcast or whatever, is because you're stuck here and don't know how to transition from here to there. It's really true, right? Like
Yeah,
it's
and,
insanity.
the other thing too is a lot of people understand the principles. They just can't put that first left foot out and follow with the right to like actually take it from theory and words in a book to real life. And there's the people that just take massive action and like put themselves out there and do it. And they're like building, getting in shape for a marathon while they're running for the first time, right? Like it's a bad
Yeah.
analogy, but you get what I'm
It's
saying.
not wrong. Yeah. One of the things that we didn't talk about too much, and I wish people talked about more, is risk reward, right? Is that the risk reward functions in people's brains are really risk averse. And that's completely cool. But like I personally think that a lot of this stuff is driven, and like the lack of ability to execute and people being afraid to do X, Y, and Z, or to take the next step. And you're saying like actually put feet to the pavement is this risk reward where you think that the risk and the reward are so far apart that like you're not willing to take the risk, and whatever that is, put yourself out there, put the money up, ask for help, find a partner, right? All of these things. And it's really hard to take that risk not knowing what the result is, right? So that's the risk reward. You don't see the reward. At least oh, the risk is I get a new job, and the reward is I get more money, right? Okay. What's the reward for starting a business? The reward is I get more work.
Oh man, that is great. Cause I mean, the name of this podcast is the business growth journey. And the way you just described risk versus reward is exactly what it's all about, right? Like you're running straight out into the world with blind faith and belief that things are going to go right, knowing that you're going to stub your toe, you're going to like land in a couple potholes, you're going to have to figure it out and keep getting back up, and knowing that you're chasing the reward instead of running from the risk.
Yeah, and we didn't, and I'm not going to kind of go off on tangents on failed stuff, but we didn't talk about the things that I have done that have failed, right? Like we have I've worked with people to start like software businesses, and we had like an AI enabled like chat business that we were looking at, and kind of the software engineer that I was working with fell off. Like these things happen, right? So there are, and my wife always derides folks. She's like, I wish people could see all the stuff that you failed at in a good way. Didn't go
Yeah,
out right, but
no,
she's like, I
no,
wish they
no,
could
but
see all of these things. Like,
that's incredibly important, and that goes back to what you said earlier of being given the space in the room to be able to fail and understand what that actually means to eliminate the fear. I mean, like you see people that, and there's nothing wrong with this, but like they just want to stay in the same spot because they don't want the change, or they don't want to even consider what the risk could be. And then being able to have the space to fail and know and believe in yourself to be able to get back up, that you're going to figure it out, is like one of the greatest skills there is, right?
yep, it is a skill, and it's a skill to be
Yeah.
developed. And so it's not like you just have it overnight either, right? Like it never gets that much easier. We're talking about it like, oh, you just have to be able to fail. Like it's not fun. Any of these projects that I've described, some of them recent, right? Like it didn't make me happy when you're like, this thing's going away, right? We registered domains, we have some intellectual property, but it's just not going to work. You know what I mean? And you're just like, you have to sit down one night, right? And just like pull the plug, or, one weekend or one month. And you're just like, this is the last month of this thing. It's just not going in the direction we want it to go in. And the same thing in your business when you're trying things out, when you're trying marketing or advertising approaches, or when you're trying even teams, when you're trying like in the dental office, we call it a handoff, when your patient goes from right the clinical chair to the front office and they schedule their next appointment and pay or whatever, right? Like maybe you're trying things in this handoff and some of it's working, and both sides, like the clinician and the front office team member are really understanding that handoff and feeling as though they're providing value to the patient. And sometimes they're like, this isn't working, dude. Like, I don't want to do this anymore. And you're like, okay, great. And you realize in your business, sometimes it's not just you failing either, right? Sometimes you have to say, hey man, we wanted to go in this direction and it didn't work. Like, and we're committed to you guys. So you should know that we're there for you, but also you should know that like we are not infallible, right? We can make mistakes and we are going to own up to them too.
I mean, and that's another great component you're mentioning is the development of becoming a leader, right? Like growing into the leadership component, which is a whole different animal when you go from being the doer to then the manager and then being able to understand how to lead and put out goals and help grow people in addition to the nuts and bolts of the business.
I think that's where people find it difficult too, is like, leadership is, important. And then when it's your butt on the line all the time, not just like you could get fired, but it's like your money and your risk and your reputation and all that stuff. Like, it's hard, man. It's hard to be like, hey, we messed up, or hey, like it's okay that you had family things and you had to be out for 2 weeks and X, Y, and Z, and it caused us to miss a couple of things at the office. Like it's hard to be that person, right? All the time, because there are days when you come home, and I'm really grateful that my wife and I get to do this together with the dental office. Is, there are days that we're like, man, this is hard. It's just hard to be consistent, to be approachable, to take responsibility, to not pawn it off on other people, to put my best foot forward, to take patient complaints and customer complaints and not lose it on people because you're having a bad day. Like, it's just like, and I'm not saying, hey, you have a bad day, but all of those things, it's hard not to internalize some of that stuff and not to, be frustrated with other people, or not represent yourself the way you want, because everything that you say and do is a representation of you and your business, right? When you're at the head of that business, it just is. And that's a fact of life, unfortunately.
Yeah. So Travis, one of the things that as we're wrapping up here that I've picked up on from you and in this podcast and since I've had the opportunity to continue to get to know you is just the curiosity and fun that you make things like it's genuine curiosity of like I'm curious because I like it, right? Like and like that's a radiant quality that I think also helps other people become curious and like be like you have fun doing this stuff, man. Like it beams off and it's cool. So, if as we wrap up here, what's advice you would give someone that's, in the middle of their business and growing and like, all the different things that are running through their head of like, I need to do this, I'm growing here, I need to study this. Like it's nonstop. Like what is advice you would give somebody that's continuing in that space?
Yeah, it's nonstop and it's hard. I'll tell you the thing that I really like the most, and we kind of alluded to it as we were getting to the end here, which was right being kind of taking responsibility and taking ownership of all these things. I think when you realize that you have the ownership of all of it, right? Then that gives you agency, right? And you're like, okay, well, if I don't like this thing about the way my business is going or the direction it's going, right? Then that is a representation of the way that I'm running it. Right. Regardless of whether it is or isn't. And I think it's Jocko Willink, right? And honestly, I haven't read the whole book. I've read snippets of it and this and that. I need to go back and read it, but I just love that concept. And it really and that allows you to interpret it through whatever lens, right? You said I really like, I'm really like a happy go lucky guy and I like to enjoy this stuff. Okay. Well, for me, ownership looks like I get to do this thing, right? For me, it's like, okay, well, what does that mean? How do I figure it out? I take an engineering mindset to it. That's not everybody, right? Some people are like, well, I'm gonna, put a plan in. My wife is not that way, right? She's like, I'm gonna put a plan in place and we're gonna have checklists and I'll check it off in the morning and make sure that people are doing it. If they are, then we're happy. And if not, then we'll remind them, right? And that's not me, right? I'm not a checklist. I'm a doer, a thinker, and a problem solver, right? But either lens, if you're taking responsibility and you're taking ownership of that thing, then it allows you to let, whatever it is about your personality that makes you drive your business forward, it allows you to do that thing, right? Where you say, okay, I have control of it. And when you lose that like mentality, and I do it too, I'm not saying that you have to have this all the time, but when you lose that mentality is where I think I get most frustrated. When I feel like I don't have control over, I feel like it's not a representation of the way I'm doing things. Like, why is this not going the way I want it to? Why is my cybersecurity business not scaling the way I want it to? Because it's a representation of the way I'm doing it, right? Like that's okay. And it's a tough thing to think about sometimes, but it gives you that agency and that ownership to like drive that thing forward at whatever stage you are, right? I think it works from 0 to 1. I think it works from 1 to 10. I think it works from 100 grand to $1 million business. I think it works above that too, but it's worked for me from some of those stages.
Man, this is good stuff. All right, Travis, if you could tell us about Twin Creeks Family Dentistry.
Yeah, Twin Creeks Family Dentistry is a dental office here in Kansas City that my wife, Dr. Anisha Patel, is the primary practitioner at. We have a team of 6 or 7 who are just absolutely amazing. We just passed our 3-year mark of owning that dental office. We are, adding new patients, on a monthly basis, and we're adding new services and really interesting things that she is doing with some of her services and full mouth rehabs and dental implants and some of these things that other offices don't necessarily offer, that she is a wonderful practitioner and is fully qualified to do, and just has done a bunch of additional education to really make her stand out as an amazing practitioner. And we are chugging along in year 4, and we're really excited for kind of what the future will hold for us.
Thank you, Travis. That was awesome. And that's great life-changing work that your wife's doing for people, like with full mouth rehabs, with dental implants. I mean, like that's game changing for the people's lives that she touches. That's awesome.
You and I have talked about this off podcast at a different time, but like I couldn't believe how important oral health is for your overall health and how it really impacts your life, both like physically and kind of like the way you see yourself, right? Both things. Yeah, it's
Absolutely.
amazing.
Well, Travis, thank you so much for joining the Business Growth Journey podcast, man. It was great having you on and hearing your story.
Thanks, Nick. We did it.